What's going on, guys? Welcome to the David F. Haas podcast. I'm your host, David F. Haas. I'm here today with a good friend of mine, Lisa Orantes. How was that?
That was good.
No, I still butchered it. But Lisa and I have been friends for, I don't know, a good amount of time now. You know, we've been...
3-4 years?
Yeah, 3-4 years.
Yep.
She kind of started hanging around in the same circles that I was hanging around with, doing some work with my friend and mentor, Andrew. But she has a really interesting story. I think she's in a really good place, mindset-wise, with respect to what's happening in the pandemic. And I'm like super excited to kind of like, you know, give you kind of a platform here to tell your story, because you've kind of been telling it in pieces on Facebook. And I follow you on Facebook and Instagram, and I love the posts and everything that you're doing. So without kind of like making this thing too gigantic, first and foremost, like, you know, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you coming and doing this. But like, why don't you kind of like start with where this thing started? We'll kind of break it into parts instead of you just talking for like 45 minutes. So like, where did this whole thing start for you, and this path that you're on, and how it kind of led to where you're at here?
Okay. Well, first, thank you for having me on. Yeah. I'm really excited to share my story. So this started about 4 years ago. I had about a decade of health issues with Hashimoto's and different autoimmune conditions. I did all the things that Western medicine had told me to do. They worked for a few years, and then I would just find that every time I did something, it would work for a year or two, and all of a sudden there'd be some kind of decline. And then I would do something else, there'd be some kind of decline. And then around 2017, it just, like, my health just hit rock bottom, and I just intuitively told myself that, like, there's got to be something else there. Like, this is just not working. So I ended up, we have a mutual friend, Natalie Morse, that I ended up going to her autoimmune workshop. Did that, and then it was just like a door opened. It was more into the natural world, naturopathy and stuff like that. And then about a few months afterwards, that's where we had met. She had met Andrew. She had invited me to one of our group meetings. Mm-hmm. And she had invited me in July, and it took me from July to October to finally, like, is this really the route I want to go? Because it's not something that's really talked about, like going into, like, diving into your personal feelings and spirituality and stuff like that. So, around that time, we went to his place, and was it called Samayana?
Yeah, he was calling it Samiana.
Yeah, at the time it was called Samiana. We were getting together once a week. And I remember seeing the table, and it was just like, lay on the table, we're going to do this healing. And I'm like, what is this? Like, it was the first time I had ever seen anything like that. And I'm like, I am really desperate if I'm going to do this. And I remember getting off that table, and I cried the whole way home. And it was the first time that I'd ever slept without anxiety or hot flashes. And I remember messaging Andrew and Natalie that night. I'm like, I don't know what that was, but whatever that was, I need that in my life, and I need to figure out what it's going to do for me, and then how it can help others. So that was like the initial, like, catapult or catalyst for where I am today.
Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about healing treatments. Mm-hmm. Because people get all weirded out when you start talking about putting your hands on people and laying them on a table, and the mainstream people will say that it's hokey pokey or whatever the words are that they use.
Woo woo.
Yeah, woo woo. Yeah,
that's the one.
Yeah, so they'll use that word woo woo, and ultimately, my interpretation of it is, is just showing up and, like, essentially just like, pouring love into somebody, Yep. And when you go there with that intention to just help somebody, usually people are going to experience, some sort of miraculous benefit. And, I've been a part of like multiple healing treatments, and the funny thing about healing treatments is you need to see it over and over and over again, and until you finally start going like, this actually, there's something here.
Yes.
And even sometimes when you see it, you're like, you still question it, and there's this constant questioning. But, after a certain time, you just cannot deny that there's something going on there and people are being helped. And I remember kind of like in an effort to prove, and I don't remember if you were there or not, an effort almost like to prove to myself that this is like legit. I did like 10 free treatments on people, and I had invited Natalie. I don't know if you were there at my house. It was just like a bunch of like random people I invited.
I wasn't to that one, but I did something similar with Natalie.
Right. Yeah. Natalie did like a training. Right. Yeah. So, and I had all these people come that I've never met, and I had them fill out a form. And the one guy, like his like testimonial stuck with me. What he wrote, he's like, this healing treatment changed my life. And it was because it had brought into awarenesses the blocks that were preventing his health, and so after you kind of see that over and over again, you finally start going, okay, there's something here, and I need to like learn more, and then also be doing more of it as well, right? So I'm assuming that it was similar for you.
Oh yeah, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, so like let's just go a little deeper into that, because like I don't know why we're going down this healing road, but like what is it? What is it that happened to you on that table?
I think it was just my biggest, darkest fears and thoughts that I had of myself were just brought open. Like there was so much doubt and guilt, regret, just all those things that I just kept bottled up for decades just kind of came outpouring out of my heart and just fell off that day.
I think you described that perfectly, actually, because what happens is we have this part of us that's like a shadow, right? That it's like we don't want anyone to know about, and then all of a sudden you lay on a table with a bunch of strangers, and all that shadow comes right to the surface.
You're so vulnerable. It's like scary.
100%. But that vulnerability is like the path to, becoming free. It's like the truth will set you free. And in a healing treatment, I always assume that people that are coming to me are in a place where it's karmically appropriate for whatever they're ready for it, essentially. It's not like they're, microdosing mushrooms and having things come to them that they're not ready for. So if they're laying on that table willingly, they're saying, hey, I'm ready to figure out what's going on, and that willingness, I think, is what allows us to connect. And so, if people want like more of a description, it's like, basically if someone just lays on a table and we put our hands on them and we say, make us vehicles of that peace. Like, we're here to help. Like, what is it this person needs, and sometimes it's verbal, sometimes it's energetic, sometimes it's nothing's coming at all and you're just pouring love into them for the entire 10-15 minutes, however long it is, but almost every single time it's miraculous.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So
and I love that you said the word vulnerability, because I think that's something that people tie weakness to, and there is so much strength in vulnerability to be able to be open enough to have complete strangers just pour love onto you, regardless of where you come from in any walk of life. That's true strength to me. Yeah,
and I think also once, I think you're a great example as you had this Hashimoto's, which is essentially like an autoimmune disease.
Yep.
Right? Yeah.
Thyroid.
Yeah, right. So that you didn't have a solution to, and then when you come on the table and you start attending group, then you start to realize that it's not just A causes B. There's a million factors that could be linked to this. And there's almost like a sense of knowing, when you hear that one piece of information that they're like that. And and I think that's what that guy gave me in that testimonial was like, this changed my life. This treatment changed my life. And it was because it was like this sense of knowing that it was like, oh, it's not this disease that is holding me back from healing. It's this that might have been brought up in that treatment, right? And once you kind of see that, you just can't unsee it. Once you realize that spiritual healing is really what you needed, and like creating awareness at a level of consciousness, oh, this is what you've been avoiding your whole entire life, this fear, and now here it is right on the surface for you to look at finally. And you might not even have been aware that it was kind of running the show.
Oh God, no! At the time, no. And I love that you just said the disease.
Yeah.
Because now knowing what I know, I'm like, attaching yourself to a word like Hashimoto's or gluten intolerance or endometriosis, like these are all things that I was told I had, or nodules and goiter and all this stuff. And it's just like, when you associate yourself with that, it becomes part of you. So I like calling it the dis-ease in the body, not disease, because that totally shifts. When you realize that this is not running you, it's actually your mindset and your thoughts that are running you, then you can disassociate from what it is that people are calling it. And then you can get down to, okay, what actually is running it, not the per se disease, but whatever thought you're holding in yourself.
And this is like a point that I teach my clients and I talk about, but a lot of people have issue with it. But diseases don't exist, and so
I remember. That's funny you say that. I remember the first time when Andrew said that. I thought I wanted to throw punch him. It was just because I didn't understand that. I'm like, how dare you? Now on the other side of it, I'm like, wow, that was so true. But it's like I can see it from then what I thought. And then now I'm like, wow, that couldn't have been any more true, but I wasn't ready to hear it, right?
Right. So when we talk about that diseases don't exist, and so many people do get offended by that because they've become so identified by the disease. Like, if you're someone that has diabetes, it's like that defines who you are, right? And now someone's saying diseases don't exist. They're like, fuck you. What do you mean?
Exactly.
Look at me right here. I'm suffering from this.
Yeah.
Right. But ultimately, what it is there's something's off in the body. Then that could be even from a level of consciousness, that's affecting your mind, that's affecting your body. Mm-hmm. And when you say, like, when there's dis-ease in the body, then you're more susceptible to these things. And then once we label it cancer, or label it Hashimoto's, or label it diabetes, then all of a sudden we're now going to war against this big giant animal that is cancer, and we stop focusing on what it is that we need to do to heal, and we start fighting cancer or fighting the disease, as opposed to learning how to become free of whatever it is that we're holding on to that is creating this dis-ease in the body.
And I think it also too, it kind of allows you like a little shortcut or a removal of ownership or responsibility, because you're pointing the finger. I'm like, well, this is what's doing it, but really it's like deep down it's kind of you allowing it, whether you want to believe it or not. It's really you that has control of the steering wheel, but it's just, are you going left or are you going right? Like, which way are you going with it? Like,
and I love that you said that, because one of my top 5 transformational lessons that I learned was, I call it taking radical responsibility, right? Mm-hmm. Actually, if you want to get those top 5, you can go to my Letting Go prep school, and I have these top 5 lessons called 5 Days to Freedom. But basically, these were the 5 lessons that were I think what were critical to me to finally having this awareness. And I think the one that was I think that was one of the biggest was radical responsibility. I remember specifically the moment in time I was sitting in a coffee exchange downtown Windsor with Andrew, and he was just talking about, we were talking about my options with respect to what I was going to do with the bar, and I had all these business partners, and he had talked about taking responsibility hundreds of times to me, but for some reason in this time it stuck, and this is how we learn through repetition, and in that moment, it just came over me. And this is a big thing that I've been on lately. It's not all letting goes or teachings have to be sitting in meditation and waiting for something to come to it, or even laying on the table. You can experience major transitions just through awareness that there's something clicks, and then you experience a letting go right in that moment. And that's what it was for me. It was I was I need to take responsibility for everything that's ever happened to me in my entire life, mm-hmm. right? And that goes right in that. For me, I took it right back to the taking responsibility for the way I dealt with the death of my mother at 9 years old, right? Mm-hmm. And people are like, well, you're 9 years old, you didn't know any better. And yeah, that is true. I didn't know any better, but I still had to take responsibility for it. Mm-hmm. I could no longer be the victim of losing a parent at 9 years old that had defined me my whole entire life, right? And I think you're the same with your disease, right?
Yeah.
Which was you're no longer going to be the victim of it. You were going to say, I'm in control of this thing, right? And I'm here to take responsibility for my own health now.
Yeah, and that's what I found. I always wanted to pinpoint, like, who's the one that hurt me, who's the one that did this, or who did that. And I think I thought, like, that person that did that to me or whatever, even if it was an event, we always want to have them be the one that fix it. Well, it's not always the case, right? Like, if you can't be your own hero, then who will? It's not always, you can't always wait for someone to pop up at your door and be like, hey, I'm here to save you. Like, you got to save yourself. Like,
yeah, I really love that. Like, what are your thoughts on, I want to come back to that, but like, so like, where are you at now? Like, what are you, because you've kind of like turned this kind of into your life now, right?
Yes.
This work, right?
Yes.
So like, what is it that you're doing now?
I do a combination of energy work, but I also got into life coaching, and I did some training with NLP.
Yeah.
And I kind of tie all those together in whatever the client wants. I could be like, okay, this is what I did, but I want the client to pick what they want. Energy work may not be for them, or it could be something that, as we talk, it could be brought up later at a point. So I'm like, what can I do if someone's not into one thing but might be into another? So I did all those three things, and then in combo, I can do all three, or I can do one or two, and the client gets to pick. Because when the client can pick what their route is, it makes it a lot easier to do than when I just say, hey, like, do this because they ask me. I'm like, well, I don't want to tell you what to do. I want you to feel like you're in control. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So now you've kind of like dedicated your life to helping people uncover what it is that you uncovered that allowed you to heal, because you're healthy now.
Yeah.
Like healthier than you've ever been.
Zero
in your life.
meds. And I was told I had multiple autoimmune conditions and different things. They're like, yeah, this is a life sentence. I'm like, hell no.
Yeah.
No, this is not. I guarantee you it's not. So, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, like, it's, it's a testament to what happens when you just show up, and you were pretty dedicated there with Andrew for a long time, just like kind of showing. We were just having weekly meetings. We're doing weekly healing sessions. It was just like-minded people coming together to try and help one another.
Yeah.
And it's like a really powerful energy, and so if you just keep showing up, you're going to get it. And I just came across this quote that I think is like amazing. It's like, consciousness is not taught, it's caught.
Yeah.
And it's so true. So, but that's also like low levels of consciousness are caught as well. I was just on the phone with a client of mine, and we were talking about how he caught like not wanting to take any risk throughout his life. He was always told to play it safe and never set yourself up where you're going to lose, and so he caught that field of consciousness, which is the field of not putting yourself out there and being safe. Right. But you also catch higher levels of consciousness, and I think that was a testament to what our group was able to do. Andrew's done so much work, and just being in his presence and being in the presence of people that are at levels higher and lower than you, we all kind of came up together, and because of that, once you kind of see that, you're like, I want to share this with the world. I need other people need to know this. You can really see how you can help people. And I remember when I was getting into like amazing shape after like actually learning from Andrew. I was on like a pretty strict vegan diet, but I got really, really healthy, and everyone was asking me like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And like, I would see people and I'd be like, I can help you. Right. So as soon as you kind of see it, you're like the immediate sense that comes into you is like, I want to help other people. And so for you and I both, it's kind of turned into like a vocation. So with that being said, it's like you just talked about like, getting out of blame and getting out of the victim mentality. And we're seeing like a lot of that in the world these days. So everyone's looking to blame billionaires or the government or whatever it may be for their problems. But there's a deeper level of blame with respect to people that have harmed you or hurt you, or people that you have harmed potentially. What is your experience with like, do you believe that it has to be like a conversation between you and that person in order to heal, or do you think you can heal on your own? Like, this is always a question that I find myself asking.
I'm not sure if I understand.
So let's say you wronged somebody or somebody wronged you. Is it necessary for you to sit down and have a conversation with that person for them to forgive you or for you to forgive them?
I think my ego would say yes.
Yeah.
But if I really sat with it, no, because I've done emotional healing where at first I was like, no, we need to sit down and have this conversation. And then when I really dug deeper, I'm like, okay, like Lisa, really, does it really have to be that way?
Right.
And when I really sat with it, I'm like, no, because if you really if I really thought about it, I was like, if we sat down and you play the what if game, okay, well, it could go so many ways. If it went this way, would that be beneficial to both of us? And about like I get 80% of the way, I'm like, yeah, that all those different scenarios just ended up me feeling worse than better. So it's just like, as long as I could let it go. And if I couldn't let it go in that moment, then I'm like, okay, I don't have to let it go today, but let's keep revisiting this until I'm okay to let it go. And then it can just be, I can still send my love and forgiveness to that person or whatever it was that I was trying to deal with. And then be okay with myself too, that, okay, I may not have let it go today, but I did some work and I give myself credit for that. And then just keep going forward until it does get better.
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of people think of spirituality as like linear. It's like, hey, here's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 step process, and you're enlightened. But it's not like that. It's the things that we struggle with, the coats, we put on. They're reoccurring until they no longer occur.
Yeah.
So you may experience the same things over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Until you finally like say, oh. That you have that moment where everything clicks, and so one of them for me would be like people pleasing would be like a survival pattern that I've created, and I thought I was like free of it, and then all of a sudden I realized that the series of decisions that I've made all came from like people pleasing, and I'm like, fuck. That's still in me, I still got to do the work. So it's not like you start doing this spiritual work and you start meditating and you start connecting and you start going to getting healing treatments that you're just free immediately. It's kind of like these cycles, I guess, is what I found. I don't know if that's the same experience that you found.
I think that's funny you brought that up. Well, it's not funny. I know it's meant to come up.
Yeah, right.
But very similar the last few months. I've been like, you want to post something or you want to share something, but you're like, oh, am I going to offend this person and that person? It's just like, the offense is not with me. If someone takes offense to something, that's a reflection on them and where they're at. And I don't have to own that. As long as the intention of what I'm putting out is of pure love and to help, regardless if it's a family member or a friend or someone I care deeply about, how they react to it, I can't make them accountable for that and make myself accountable for that. I just have to know that I'm coming from a good place. And if I lose a friend, then, that was not my intention, but I can't control how people react to what my truth is. And I have to honor myself before anybody else.
Right. And then, that kind of leads me to like this place that we've gotten in this world where we can't offend anybody anymore. Isn't that wild though? It's like we're creating a society where you can't offend anybody. Like I saw something crazy the other day. It was some school in Seattle is like canceling Halloween because it's not inclusive, and I was like, what the frick is going on here? Like and I've been in the same place. I remember when I first started releasing content, like I kind of had this plan where I was going to release a bunch of content and, create awareness around what it is that I'm doing, which would lead to, me eventually coaching more people. And it worked great. But the fear that was there, when I was putting out that first piece of content was like just overwhelming. Like I probably thought about it for months before I finally created the Instagram. And then a month after that, I finally put my first post kind of thing, and it was all out of fear. And you can see that how much fear like drives the bus for us all. Right. And now I'm in this place where I'm like, I don't want to offend people. I don't want to hurt people's feelings, but I'm not ever going to change who I am. If I think it's going to, out of fear that it's going to offend somebody. Yeah. And I say that consciously, but I know that little subconscious like fear is still going to pop up every now and then. But I think we would be in like a better place in the world if more people just spoke their truth.
Yeah. I know for me, the biggest thing when I was starting to put my word out there was the word God. Oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
Like, wow, let's not use the word God. But I'm like, there's so many, whatever your version of God is. If you want to say universe, go ahead. If you want to say energy, that's fine. But if you really think about it, it's all the same thing. So let's not get so caught up in the words, and just the message is all the same.
Yeah.
Just love everybody and don't be a douchebag. Like,
Yeah.
that's pretty much what it is. Like,
Right.
regardless of what faith you walk, like, that's the message. Love everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like, you can speak your truth with love and compassion. And it's like, I think the term, like, just be brutally honest. It's like, it's what really, kind of put honesty in like, this bad place. It's like, and like, there's no need to be brutal ever.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, just be honest and do it with love and compassion.
Yeah.
So if someone asks you to do something and you don't want to do it, don't make up a lie and an excuse of why you can't do it. Just be honest and do it with love. Say, hey, thank you so much for inviting me, but I really don't feel like doing that.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, how much could be alleviated by just saying that? Like,
yeah,
you have to make up lies and then remember a month from then, like, oh yeah, I said that lie. I have to continue it. It's just like, if you had just said it honestly in the first place, done.
Yeah, 100%. So let's shift gears a little bit here, and let's talk about like the state of the world and COVID. And I know you've been pretty vocal about your stance on it, and I'm in the same boat as you, but for me it's like I believe in like choice, and I'm not vaccinated. I have no plans on getting vaccinated. And you can see where the world is going with like the hate, and you can see how the unvaccinated are going to be blamed for everything. I can see it all coming. And before we started the podcast here, I was basically talking to Lisa and saying, I'm leaving. I'm fucking leaving, and like I'm getting out of this country because, where I see it going is that the vaccine passport is the beginning, and it's not going anywhere. So while you think, I'm just going to get 2 shots and get my passport so I can go to restaurants and go to the gym, it's not going to be the end. I don't feel, and I don't know. I haven't really sat with this in guidance, but like, my instinct is that the vaccine passport's here to stay, and then it's going to be like, you need to get your booster, and if you don't get your booster, then you can't go to gyms anymore, you can't go to movies, you can't go to, I think eventually it's probably going to be more and more restricted. Yep. I think you're not going to be able to go to Home Depot or Home Hardware or Staples or whatever, any store essentially. They might even take it as far as you can't go to the grocery store, and say, you don't want to get vaccinated, you don't want to protect the society, then you may have to also order your groceries online and be super inconvenienced. And I feel like that, once you give government power, they're very reluctant to take it back or to give it back. So, but I also feel like I'm kind of wrapped up in this thing, and a little bit like I catch myself getting wrapped up. And, in the early stages of it, I would get wrapped up, and then I'd be like, no, back to the present moment. And in the present moment, everything's perfect, yes. Right? Like even right now in the present moment, I'm like, my life is great. It's like, I can't go to a restaurant, but I'm not going to a restaurant in the present moment. Yeah. Right now, I'm here with you and enjoying the conversation. But the second I go anywhere away from the present moment, then that overwhelm and everything begins to kind of overtake me. So the place that I've been struggling with is staying present, but also connecting to the duty to protect me and myself and my family. And it's a really weird spot, so I don't know, give me your take. I'm babbling here, I guess, but I don't even know where to start. There's so many.
I think the last year and a half has just been like, wow, when you think you're at a spiritual level, you're like, no. Like this really took it like, above and beyond, but I know everything that everybody's ever gone through in their life is preparing them for like a moment. So when I really sat down with this, I think of everything that me and my family have gone through in the last, 10, 20 years. And when COVID first hit, I was like, you're restricting this. And I'm like, you pretty much just described my life. I love being at home. I don't really go too much anywhere. So really in the beginning, I was like, my whole life has prepared me for this. I'm good. Right, but then when it started getting a little more progressive with like the vaccinations and stuff like that, then I'm like, okay, that's where I had to sit back. I'm like, okay, there are going to be some changes and some things I need to sit with. And for me, I don't feel like running anywhere is going to get me anything, because I feel like if I don't want to say buy into the fear, because there is reason to have fear, right? But if I let that control me, say if I go somewhere else or move somewhere, potentially there's chance for that to change wherever it is I'm going. So really, what am I doing? So I'm like, okay, how can I turn this? What have I learned in my entire life? Like, I know, we were talking about that before we started recording, was my family came from farming. Like, we know, what do I know how to do? Went to school for mechanical engineer. I'm very mechanically inclined. I'm like, what could I build? Like, we could build our own house. We could garden. We could like, what could I do? Like, I literally have 2 chickens at home right now that I'm raising because I want to have, like, it doesn't mean that's where it's going, but I want to be prepared. I don't want to fool myself into thinking that, I do want to put it in the hands of God, that yes, I trust everything that I need is going to be there. I 100% believe that. But I also want to put myself in a place of, I can't just sit there and be like, hey, God, do everything for me. Like, I got to do something too. And that's the work I'm putting myself into, is I want to be self-sufficient. I don't want to rely on someone to feed me or to give me a paycheck, which is kind of what's being, the little carrot that's being thrown around. It's like, oh, if you can't have a job, then here's CERB, or here's this or that. Like, they made the problem, but then they're making the solution to make themselves look like they're heroes. But I'm like, well, you did it. So
right.
So really, what's going on? So it's kind of tying away from that and be like, okay, I know I'm going to need this. God's going to totally guide me, but what can I do also to be part of that?
Yeah, and I think that's, that kind of like reminds me of the story of, like, the guy's in a flood, and I know you've heard this, but I'll say it for the people listening. But the guy's in a flood, and someone comes up in a canoe and says, "Hey, get in the canoe, man." He's like, "Oh no, I'm waiting for God to save me." And then the water's up on the second floor, or he's on the roof, and someone comes over in a powerboat and says, "Hey, man, get in the boat. Like, you're gonna drown. I'm waiting for God to save me." And then the water's like up to his neck, and a helicopter comes and drops a ladder and says, "Grab the ladder, before you die." He's like, "I'm waiting for God to save me," and then he dies. Right? And then he goes up to the gates of heaven, and he says to God, he's like, "Hey, like, what the heck? Where were you? Like, I was praying for you to come and save me." And God goes, "Well, I sent you a canoe, a powerboat, and a helicopter, right?" So I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head there. That there is, for me, I have a sense that everything's going to be okay. Like, I think that's kind of like what's guided me through life. Is like, I just know I've always been very solutions orientated, and I know that, like, I'm just going to come up with a solution to solve this problem. So I feel like everything's going to be okay, but that doesn't mean that I just sit back and do nothing. Right? Yeah. I still want to, take the precautions that I think that are necessary to, protect. And it's weird once you have kids. It's like, if it was just Brie and I, like, we would be on the front line that are protesting. But now that we get a kid, it's like, this changes everything. It's like, because now it's like not even, you're starting to make decisions for her and her life. So it's like, if we decide that we're not giving her the COVID vaccine, then she's never going to be able to play sports, and she's never going to be able to, maybe never be able to go to school. And so it's like all of these, you can see, you start, like I tell people all the time, it's like, stop looking at the elephant. It's like, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. But if you look at the whole elephant, it's like overwhelmed. So when you start projecting to the future, like, what happens in 3 years when Harlow has to go to school? It's like, then this thing becomes way bigger than it is, even though it is big. And these are real concerns. But if you just trust that you're going to be guided towards, that decision when it comes, and I think you're in an okay place. Yeah. Where do you think it's going? Like, I kind of gave you my insight on, like, what I think is going to happen with vaccine passports. Like, what is your view on it?
I think I agree with you that it's going to go that way. And I also see different systems being built. It's like, okay, I know there's a divide right now. You can see it, you can feel it energetically, and I'm just like, okay, everyone is in their own place. And I remember how I felt 10 years ago. Had this happened 10 years ago, I think my mindset and where I am and what I think would completely be different because I was still in a place of fear and not understanding what was going on. So I feel that there's going to be a place for people that choose to go whatever direction the government is going. And I also feel there are systems being built by people like me. Like they say, you are your best doctor. I think there's a place for people that are willing to go a different way with healing or with living, or I don't know if it necessarily would be like an organized community or what that means. Like I haven't really dug too deep because I don't want to project that on myself either. I'm like, I love electricity just like the next person. Like it doesn't mean I want to go living in the woods like a bushwoman or something. But I don't want to go that far into it. But yeah, that's kind of where I see different systems that will not just let majority through. Like I want to see a health system that helps everyone individually, not like a cookie cutter system. Like this is what's going on with me personally. Help. That's what I want to see, and that's what I feel is going to happen. May not be in the way that I think or what I envision right now, but that's why I see where it's going, and that's where we're going to be led.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Like I also believe that this is like a great awakening for like mankind. While it doesn't feel like that now, it's if you kind of like look at like universal principles. Universal principles is that the things that I look back at my life, and the most difficult times of my life ended up being the most transformational times of my life. So. Humanity as a whole is going through this very difficult time, and you can already see how it's beginning to shift people. Like one real obvious shift is like a lot of people just don't trust the media anymore.
Yeah.
And whereas before, we were blindly just agreeing with everything that we read in the news, and so now it's like now you begin to question. So like there's an awakening there, right? I remember the awakening I had with respect to like when I went veg, and the realization that like drinking milk doesn't give you stronger bones, and so but that was been sold to us. Mainstream media was like 5 basic food groups, all of this stuff, and it was all like just in an effort to sell more milk.
Oh yeah.
And but we all believed it. People still believe it.
I remember growing up. I was just talking with a coworker the other day about this too, like the food pyramid. It's like 10 to 12 grains a day. Like, what?
Yeah.
Like you're talking like 10, 12 slices of bread. Like.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Right.
And you think about that now. I'm like, and that's just all to sell wheat, to sell.
Yeah.
Meat, to sell dairy. Like and it's changed now, but I'm just thinking, now that you say that, like growing up, like how that affected all of us in like, in the 80s and 90s and whenever that was. Yeah.
The 5 basic food groups, and half of them were, more than half of them were based on dairy, cattle, farming, animal products and stuff like that. So it's like, holy Jesus, and now they have a new model, which is great. And, people woke up, but, a lot of people, for example, still believe that in order to have strong bones, you need to drink milk. And I'm not hacking on people that drink milk. You want to drink milk, go and drink all the milk you want. But, just realize there's a truth behind what's happening, And so I think people are starting to see that truth. While it doesn't feel like it, as we get to like a 90% vaccination rate in my mind, but that's just my own personal opinion.
Yeah.
But I do think that this is going to be a transition, a shift in consciousness. And I've been Hawkins is like Dr. David Hawkins is the guy that I listen to a lot, so I've been really like just listening as much as I can. Like I listen to audiobooks. I'm driving out to Harrow every day to the park, and so I'm listening to a lot of like Hawkins lectures and these types of things, and just to try and get aligned with that. But what Hawkins has always basically said is that we have a level of consciousness of humanity, and it was stuck at like 190, which is below the critical level of integrity for a long time. But then in like the 80s, it shifted and it went above that, and maybe we're dropping back down now, but I think that drop or whatever is going to be, this next this next leap for us. And, if
Yeah.
society as a whole moves to a place of courage, we're going to really be advancing quickly,
I feel like we're there.
Yeah.
Energetically, I feel like we're there. It's just we might need a little more time just to get past that like little hump, when you make that first leap.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're just on the cusp, like we want to jump, but
Right.
it's just like you're
Yeah.
still hesitant. You're looking at that diving board like, do I really want to jump? But I feel like we're really close. But.
Yeah, and it's like even people that are getting vaccinated, and especially the people that have been like forced to with threat of losing their job or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're seeing it, but they're also at this place where like like we talked about in the beginning of this podcast about like speaking your truth, no matter what, and so do you want the vaccine? No, but you're still getting it, right? And it's out of the fear of them taking your livelihood or whatever that may be. And my wife has always been like really great at speaking her truth, and so no matter what, and unapologetically. And but the more I think people begin to do that, it essentially just comes to this like one simple thing. It's like you just don't do things that you don't want to do, and that is, I think, a point of contention for a lot of people. It's like, well, you got to do things you don't want to do, but it's like, well, no, you don't.
Yeah, no.
You don't.
No.
Yeah. So.
But there's like a fine line with it's like, do I do my dishes? No, I don't feel like doing it, but yeah, I'm going to do it. But there's a difference, right?
Yeah.
Where you're defining that I don't want to do it. Like it's like it depends what we're talking about here. Like when you're losing your integrity or what really feels truthful to you, you're not going to lose that from doing the dishes, but you will lose that from getting a vaccine, right? So it's different. Yeah.
You will lose that from people pleasing. Doing something that you don't agree with just to make sure you don't hurt other people's feelings. Not putting a post out that you believe in because you're worried about how it offends people. Like you lose a little bit of who you truly are. And like another critical 5 steps that I had was integrity was like the big one. It's like once I began to live a life of integrity, everything shifted for me. It was just like I just didn't tell any lies ever. But then I realized there's these levels of integrity. Like people pleasing is a form of not having integrity because you're lying to yourself. And so and so getting the vaccine when you don't believe in it is a form of lying to yourself. So every time you lie to yourself, you feel a little less deserving, a little less worthy, a little bit more disconnected from your true and higher self. And so I think people are starting to realize that, like the more decisions I made out of people pleasing, and then I could see the consequences of people pleasing. Yeah. The more I was like, I better really watch this.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to get in this position where I'm doing things that I don't want to do because you could end up living your whole life based on like one simple decision. You could be in a job that you hate. You could get a vaccine that creates some sort of issue in your life. It's like and this is interesting too because it's very hard to see outside your own bias, right? Like very hard, and I get that. Like I understand that on my own. Like that I'm biased towards like I'm not getting the vaccine, and I don't think people need it, right? Yeah. But that's my own point of view. So then I actively am aware that I'm only looking within that bias. I'm only watching the news that I want to see. So I try and step outside of that as much as I possibly can. But when you're constantly just looking inside the circle of what you end up kind of like limiting yourself. Yeah. And so it's hard to get outside of that circle. To see the greater picture. What are some things that you're doing? Like, because I know you're super intuitive, and you posted that big post about like connecting to like the fear of humanity and everything that you're feeling, and I people say like, what is this connecting and spiritual healing? It's like I was over at my family's the other day, and we were having like a pretty deep conversation about COVID, and my family, especially particularly my one aunt, is like very like pro-vaccine, and I love my aunt and I respect her immensely, right? But you could literally feel the tension in the room. Right?
Oh yeah.
And but like that's like an expression that people just say in passing. You could feel the tension in the room. Yeah. But like that's intuition. Yeah. When you tune in to other people's emotions, like what is that? It's like not just some fleeting thing. It's like this is the the confirmation that we're all interconnected,
Yeah.
right? Without even saying a word. Like, actually, when we were having the discussion, my aunt was in the kitchen, like, preparing Thanksgiving dinner or whatever, but I could literally feel the tension building, you know, and then she ended up finally saying something, but it's like, you know, without her saying a word, I could feel it. So that's like intuition. So when you're saying, you know, that's us being interconnected. So when you made that post, which was beautiful, and I loved it, and it's like, yeah, you're feeling the weight that, you know, people are on. It's like, so what is it that you're doing? You know, like, I guess it is tuning into that, but like, is there a process? How do you tune into that, or what?
I just know naturally I'm a calm, like I have like an inner calm and peace. People tell me that. I didn't really know that until now. So when I feel outside of that, something's going on. I'm picking up on something either within myself or something around me. So that specific night, I just woke up. It was 3:00 in the morning, 3:30, and I was just anxious. And it was just like, oh my God, like there was so many thoughts, and I'm like, I know this is not mine. And I'm like, I didn't really know what to do with it. And that's where I was like tuning in. It was just on a conscious level, and it was globally. And I'm like, okay, I'm not taking any of this on. I'm lovingly giving it all back, but I do want to offer something, some love. So I sat, I think for about an hour and a half, just I lit some candles, I did some prayers, and then I just lovingly gave love and just calm and peace. And then when I felt like it just felt better, and then I just went to bed.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing that you say, is about like recognizing when you're taking on other people's shit. It's like, you know, this happens in coaching a lot, you know, like when you're really showing up for people, you really want to help them. A subconscious thing that can happen is you take on their problems to try and lessen their burden, right? But really, that's the last thing we want to do. We want to allow them to feel that burden fully, you know, that they can become free of it, right? But yeah, and that actually is a great advice, I think, for me too, because, you know, I think that I've been taking on a lot of what's going on in the world, you know, and taking on, like, you know, the stress that my wife's feeling, and other people that are in similar positions.
And it's hard not to, because, you know, you live with them and you want them to feel like comforted and safe, and you can't always offer that, right?
Yeah, you know,
no matter how much you try.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, we have this like a innate lovingness in us, and when we see people hurting, we want to make them feel better. And so, you know, when I see my wife all stressed out, I was telling you, we're up to 2 a.m. trying to decide what we're going to do with our lives. You know, my instinct is like, I just want to pull her out of it. And, you know, mistakenly as a man, it's like I pull her out of it by offering her solutions, and that's not what she wanted, you know. So, but it's like, that's what you want to do, is you want to pull people out of their pain. I give the example all the time. It's like when I was a kid and my mom died, and you know, I was in the funeral home. Every single person that walked up to me and could see how much pain I was in, they were trying to say things to pull me out of that pain, right? But what I really needed was someone to pull me aside and be like, just sit here and feel it, like stay with it, just let it run its course until it's gone, right? But slowly they pulled me away, and then it took me, you know, 30 years to try and reconnect and let that pain go for real once and for all, you know, so that I let go of that grief. So recognizing that it is within us, I think, to take on other people's issues.
Oh yeah.
And we can take on the issues of the world if we're not careful as well, right? And that will turn out in our own lives as like stress and you know.
I always like to describe when people ask me about energy, I like describing it as like perfume. You don't see it, but as you walk, people can feel it, whether it's good or, you know, you're having a bad day, good day. I know a trigger spot used to be the mall. There's so many people walking, all of a sudden I'd be like, oh, I feel good, and all of a sudden, just within 5 minutes, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so tired, and just this roller coaster of feelings. Then I'd go home like, I need a nap. But that was the best way for me, like after I started learning about energy and recognizing what it was. It's just like, you have to be aware of what you're projecting to yourself and to the world. So when you're walking into a place angry, that's going everywhere, and people are walking through that, and they have no idea, if they don't know about it or not conscious of it, that they're bringing that home. And then you go to cook dinner, and all of a sudden you're angry, and you're putting that energy into your food, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I burnt this, I did this, and then your family's eating it, and then it's just like, and it just stemmed from one person that you kind of had a passing by of, and it just, energy just, it follows. Like, it doesn't, it transforms, and it goes into your food, and then now you're like, oh, this meal didn't really taste that good. And then the first thing that pops in my head is like, nobody beats grandma's cooking, because grandma made it with love. That's the one ingredient. So that's, I feel, is the major ingredient right now, regardless of where you are on any stance of COVID or government or just life in general. Love has always been the key to everything.
Yeah, 100%. You know, it's like, and that was actually going to be the next question that I was going to ask you. It's like, what is it that you think people can do in these uncertain times? And I think you already answered it with love. You know, is this because it's easy to get wrapped up in wanting to be angry. You know, wanting to be angry at the government, wanting to be angry, you know, at your family for not, you know, understanding like why you're doing the things you're doing, you know, and your business partners, whatever it may be. And, you know, I had this moment of like, and it's like recognizing what it's like to be like oppressed, you know, and it's like, it's not the fact that I can't go to restaurants or I can't go to the gym. That doesn't bother me, you know. It's the fact that no one else cares. Right? It's like all the vaccinated people are like, what do you mean? Like, what's the problem in the world right now? And I'm like, there's no problems for you. You know, so now I recognize, like, you know, how, you know, minorities must have felt, you know, African Americans felt back in the day. And I'm obviously not comparing, but I get it. Like, I can empathize now with them. Yeah. Right? It wasn't so much that they were being segregated. It was that no one gave a shit. Yeah. You know, it was like, and so that's what I'm like, wow. And so I can see how easy that could turn to anger, you know, because there's energy in anger and you want to blame somebody, you know? So I think you're definitely right that the answer is love. There's also awareness to begin to like, be aware of taking on that energy, you know, like I even said to Brie last night, I said, I feel like I'm too in this, like, and I think you've given me confirmation that by being in it, what I'm basically doing is taking on all of that anger, taking on all of that uncertainty and fear and everything that's wrapped up in it, you know. So it's just like, oh, let me just take a step away from this. Yeah. Right. You know, I was pretty much avoiding it all, like not even turning on the news. Like people would say, "Oh, did you hear this?" I'd be like, "No, that's serious." You know, like, maybe I should start watching the news, and that's kind of like where it came from. And since pretty much the not being allowed to go to the gym and stuff. So ever since then, it's kind of, I feel like I've been consumed by it, you know? Yeah. And so, I kind of like let the energy of the world, but like, let's kind of like leave it at this. So when you say love is the answer, that's like a very great answer, but like, what does that mean?
Wherever anybody is in their position, whether, they want to get vaccinated, they don't want to get vaccinated, they want to leave, they don't want to leave, all you can do is love them. You don't have to take on their energy. You don't have to lose your integrity. If you're coming across somebody that just, I don't know, gives you attitude, or just, you can just be in a place, be like, okay, I have no idea what happened in their day. I don't have to take it personal. Just let it go. And just as they pass, just, I'll say like a little prayer, or just be like, you know what, I love you anyway, kind of thing. Yeah. Like, just putting it that way. And then also, just giving extra time. People in the past year and a half have been so disconnected because they have to. They have to stay home, or they have to. Right. Giving an extra 3-4 seconds to be like, "How's your day?" You wouldn't believe just stuff that comes out of people's mouth. Like, "Oh my God, today was so horrible," or just what. And sometimes it's just needed. Just listen. Just sit there. You don't have to give your opinion. You don't have to give your view. They don't have to hear my healing story. They just need to be heard. You don't need to try and
make it better.
Right. Yeah. I just sit with them. And if it's just asking how their day is, you might have just not bought them, but like gave them an outlet. Yeah. And all I had to do was just, how was your day? Yeah. Hawkins that little showing that you care.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Hawkins said that your level of spiritual growth is based on how loving of a person you are, right? And so that kind of hit me hard the other day. I was like, that's interesting, you know. And so, you know, a lot of people get consumed by like spiritual entertainment, right? But like true spiritual growth is is like that's how it defines it. Is like to love someone even in the face of them, hating you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a difficult thing to do, but I think that is the solution for us now, and there's a preparedness that we have to have for what's to come. But yeah, I think a combination of preparing, staying present, loving people, that's probably the way through this thing. However long it lasts.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thanks a lot for coming on. I think super insightful. I feel like we could do like part 2. Yeah. For sure. It's like you see, there's just so much to kind of go over. But how can people get in touch with you if they're interested in what it is that you do?
I'm on Facebook, on Instagram, either through my name, Lisa Orantes, or Rooting Health. I have both.
Cool. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll link you and everything, and thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it's great to catch up, and it was good for me too. It's what I needed.
Not see you on Zoom.
Yeah, 100%.
We've had
it's nice to be in person here. Yes. Yeah, for sure, 100%. All right, so thanks for listening to the podcast. Don't forget, if you haven't already, just make sure you click that subscribe button, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.